Good morning and welcome to Real Luck Group Webcast as part of the Planet MicroCap Showcase. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to your host, Quentin Martin of Real Luck Group.
Hi, good day everyone. I'm here to talk about Luckbox, the premier esports betting platform around the world. With that in mind, let me skip a couple of our disclaimer slides. So we are a fully licensed esports betting platform. Esports being competitive video gaming, and I'll give a quick overview of that shortly, and betting on it being about 90% the same as the existing sports betting legislation around the world. The company started off around 3 years ago, headquartered on the Isle of Man, so between the UK and Ireland. We went public on the TSX around Christmas time this year, and now we're based headquartered in Alberta. We're on the TSX-V with the handle LUK, and we're also listed on the OTCQB with the handle LUKEF, LUKEF. Esports in 2019 was already big. It did about 1.4 billion Canadian in revenue. All figures in this presentation will be in Canadian dollars. Adjacent to that, esports betting did about $1 billion, or a little bit more, making it the single largest revenue stream within esports if you put those two together, and according to Goldman Sachs, growing at about 44% year on year. We're lucky to be working in an industry that's shown itself to be pretty resilient to COVID. I'll touch more about that later on as well. We are fully licensed globally with a premium gambling license, and I'll talk about how that gives us not only a barrier to entry, but it gives us a substantial competitive advantage as well. And we have a veteran team made up of professionals from the gambling sphere as well as those from the esports sphere. And it's really kind of a combination of those two. My background kind of leans into that as well. So I used to be a professional gamer as a teenager. I played any computer game that would have prize money. I played a geeky game called Magic the Gathering. I was UK #1 for 8 years, Canadian #1 when I lived over there. Then became a professional poker player, and I was headhunted to work for PokerStars, where I was there for the better part of a decade, being the largest online poker company, which was acquired by Flutter in a $20 billion market cap deal recently. While I was there, I was blessed to report to the CEO. I worked on 26 different gambling licenses around the world, and my last role was as general manager of their free-to-play gaming studio. Our platform is bespoke. You know, the website, the front end is fully proprietary, and the back end has a multiplicity of third parties integrated to meet the compliance and regulatory requirements of the gambling space, and also to solve the challenges of the nascent esports industry. So normally I play a pretty cool video here, get everyone really hyped about esports. So I'm just going to have to assume that you've just watched an amazing video of an arena sold out to full capacity of cheering fans. What is esports? So it's competitive video game, and it has exactly the same infrastructure pretty much as traditional sports. You know, the teams, for example, have coaches and dietitians, psychologists, social media specialists, fans, merchandise, etc. And they sell out arenas. For example, this is Madison Square Garden, sold out to full capacity in 2019. Some quick stats to highlight from this slide. More than a third of the world are gamers, you know, more than 2.5 billion people. 3/4 of esports enthusiasts are 18 and older, you know, meaning they are gambling eligible. That zeitgeist that computer games are for kids is just no longer true. For example, our average bettor is 32 years old. And it is very real. The largest prize pool in esports was the International. This had a $22 million first prize. That was for a team of 5, so each of them took home about $4.4 million. In comparison, when Novak Djokovic hoisted the Wimbledon trophy, which is the single largest first prize in traditional sports, he only won $4 million. Oh, I've jumped around on slides apparently. Okay, let's come here. So my favorite stat in this presentation is at the top here. 18 to 25-year-olds watch, not play, watch more computer games than traditional sports. This is the tipping point. If you take anything away from it, it's this. This demographic has 50 plus years of growth as they become 75-year-olds in retirement homes playing and watching computer games. You know, the League of Legends World Championships, one of the largest esports tournaments of the year, has more viewers in the last 2 years than the Super Bowl. Everywhere you look, you know, it's already almost 3 times the size of hockey, overtaking Major League Baseball. This year it should surpass the NBA, and it's on track for the NFL in a year or two. There's absolutely obscene growth here. Now, with that in mind, why esports betting? If I put my investor and a hat on and I look at the esports space, I can see some risk. I can see companies with often unproven monetization. Now, this isn't the case with esports betting because it uses the same infrastructure and legislation as traditional sports betting. That's one of the reasons why it's the largest single revenue stream within esports today. And often, the esports companies, whether they're teams or event organizers, are heavily tied into a particular title or a particular publisher. And if that publisher or game were to disappear, it would heavily affect them. So, for example, in 2020, Fortnite, one of the largest games in the world, cancelled its esports calendar, and the number one Fortnite team lost about 90% of its revenue. Esports betting is totally agnostic of these trends, in exactly the same way that FanDuel, DraftKings, Bet365 don't really care if you bet on football or hockey, or if you like Roger Federer or Rafa Nadal. You're going to bet, and on average, they're going to win. And it's the same model for us with esports. And there's that headline statistic of growing at 44% year on year. So, sorry, getting used to the slides. There's a bit of lag here. Okay, perfect. So, if I give a quick overview of how the gambling industry works. So on the left-hand side here, these are the low cost per acquisition products that they use to acquire users into their ecosystem. So bingo, lottery, poker, but predominantly sports betting because there are events every single week going on. Great way to acquire and retain customers. This is where esports sits as well at the moment. Once you've acquired these users, you cross-sell them between all of these product verticals to increase your customer lifetime value, but primarily to casino or slots, which makes up between 3 to 20 times the customer lifetime value, but is prohibitively expensive traditionally to acquire directly for. So this is the traditional model, and esports right now sits as a growing acquisition channel. As we looked at that stat of 18 to 25-year-olds preferring to watch computer games than traditional sports, we can see we know that size is going to grow until it becomes the largest single acquisition channel into the gambling ecosystem. And most importantly, as many gambling markets around the world are quite mature, they normally acquire users from their competitors or they're reactivating old users. Esports represents one of the few ways to actually bring the younger demographics in the gambling industry into the space. And it represents a huge growth opportunity to the gambling space as a whole. Now, to talk through that, regulation in the space is, gambling is one of the most regulated industries on the planet in just the same way as like the finance or banking industries. If you think about it, customers are essentially opening a bank account with you. You have to do customer verification, anti-money laundering. You have to combat the financing of terrorism. Once you've got their money on their site, you have to do cybersecurity, player protections, responsible gambling. You have to perform legitimate gambling activities, and then if they win, pay them back. To really simplify, there are 3 types of licenses around the world. You have regional licenses. So the example I've used here is the UK license. These licenses are very specific to a country, and you must have them to operate in that country. But they often have, they're not cheap. The UK license, for example, costs maybe $250,000 up front. Maybe it takes you 2 to 3 years to get your tech stack fully compliant, maybe about $2 to $3 million in setup costs. And it charges you about 15% of your revenue. Some of the US states, can be upwards of 10 million. Very prohibitively expensive. But because they're so heavily compliant, you have really good banking partners, payment processes will work with you, and you can scale. It's easier to go public. And we'll talk more about the trade sale potential in a moment. Then you've got the offshore licenses. On one hand of the spectrum, you've got kind of what I like to call the cowboy licenses. The most common example of this is the Curacao license. This is based in the Dutch Antilles in the Caribbean. And this takes maybe a couple of weeks to get $25,000. But because it only takes a couple of weeks, there's very, very little compliance. You do not have to pass an audit. Your directors don't have to have police background checks. And there's almost no way for third parties who work with you to prove that you're not money laundering, as a result of which your banking partners will be in Cyprus or Kyrgyzstan, and those payment processes The big ones like credit cards or PayPal simply won't work with you, which is really important as that's the number one way customers get money to you. On the other hand of the spectrum are the pedigree offshore licenses, such as the Isle of Man or Malta. We have an Isle of Man license. This is where we're headquartered. This is where industry giants such as PokerStars, Microgaming, Playtech all started their life and generally hold this license still to today. And as a result of which, those key variables that are linked to compliance, the Isle of Man is maybe 80% as strict as, say, the UK license. And as a result of which, you've got much better banking relationships. We have 2 to 4 times the number of payment processes than those people who operate on the Curacao license, etc. But most importantly, it affects trade sale potential. The gambling industry is made up of about $50 billion plus businesses, all of whom operate on 10 to 30 gambling licenses, and they're very strict regulatory committees. And they can only really acquire companies that meet the same standards. Otherwise, they can't take the tech and replicate it. They can't take your existing customer base and leverage their existing assets there. Now, in the esports betting space, there's only about 5 or 6 well-regulated esports betting companies, of which Luckbox is one. So really, if you think about it, it's very much a seller's market. And because it takes 2 to 3 years to get up and running with these licenses, we've got quite a barrier to entry. So it'll be a seller's market for the next few years. And as we talked about on the previous slide, esports will become the number one acquisition source into the gambling space. So companies such as Luckbox will be at a premium. So I have to talk a bit about COVID. I'll just draw your attention to the graph at the bottom here. This is hours watched in Twitch, Twitch being the number one game streaming platform in the West, bought by Amazon for about $1.4 billion back in 2011. You can see clear as day where the pandemic hit. It has accelerated the esports industry a year or two into the future, and that growth has been sustained as traditional sports have started to come back, as certain countries have come out of lockdown. But what happened as a result of COVID was an increased demand for premium esports betting solutions such as ourselves. We have already received several acquisition offers. It's a great indication that we're in the right space. But we've gone public, we've raised enough capital. But it's a hint of a likely part of our future, which may well involve an acquisition to those billion-dollar bad boys. So this graph is a quick trend graph to show kind of how that growth at Luckbox, was also mirrored. These were anchored to where we were in November 19, and you can see we saw substantial growth through the pandemic. Some of our key performance indicators up 10, 15x. Next is an industry metric. I just want to draw your attention to the 2 green bars here. These show that the value of an esports bettor tripled pre-pandemic to now. We saw it sextuple at Luckbox, and a key part of that is because of how we solve the customer needs through our dedicated platform. So firstly, I'll just draw your attention to the 2 screenshots at the bottom here that may be a little bit difficult to look at. On the left-hand side is Pinnacle. This is the second largest traditional sports book in the world. These screenshots were taken at exactly the same time of exactly the same map. And on the left, it looks like a spreadsheet from the early 90s, and very few options to bet upon, not very exciting. On the right is our website. You can go and check it out now on luckbox.com. You can see that we've got the stream embedded. So we have maybe 95% of streams on both mobile and desktop, so you can watch and chat in real time whilst betting. And in addition to that, I'm just going to use a quick analogy to explain, to save you reading these bullet points. So let's say there was you wanted to place a match. Let's say Federer was playing Nadal and you wanted to place a bet on Federer. So you go to a betting site, but for whatever reason they don't have the game. It's easy. You're going to go somewhere else. So you go somewhere else. They've got the game. Fantastic. You reach into your pocket for your preferred payment method, whether it's your credit card or PayPal, and they don't support it. Again, you're going to go somewhere else. Now, that might sound like a really simple example, but that last one is down to your license, which is down to the number of payment methods you support. Again, we have 4 times any of those of our competitors on licenses such as Curacao. And then first one, having the game. Now, this might sound obvious, but because esports is nascent, data is fragmented. The biggest odds compilers in the space, which are the ones that the majority of those 50-odd billion-dollar plus gambling companies use, such as SportsRadar, only offer about 50% match coverage, meaning they only offer betting on 1 in 2 matches in the space. We knew this when we built our platform, and we built it to take from multiple sources. We have as close to 100% match coverage as anybody in the space. In fact, if I jump to the next slide, the column on the right shows an example of that coverage. At the top, you've got some of our better endemic rivals, such as Unicorn, Rivalry, Fans. They have maybe 10 to 20% more than those. At the bottom, though, you begin to see those traditional gambling companies. Pinnacle are trying the hardest. They've done quite a good job. Bet365, the largest sports betting company in the world, only offers matches on about 3 out of 4. Flutter, the Stars Group, my own company, and many of the others, I could have used Entain, William Hill, only offer about 50% match coverage. And because of the amount of effort it takes, even though these are very rich companies, because of the innovator's dilemma, every time they try to organically develop esports internally, it's competing with the same resources that could be used to build a new casino feature or a new tennis or football feature. And it's better for those companies to do those because it helps benefit their user base of millions. And this is the key reason why many of the CEOs in the space have chosen to get into esports inorganically via acquisition rather than building it themselves. In fact, Rafi Ashkenazi, my old boss, the old CEO of Flutter, said that he had a check waiting on his desk for a well-licensed esports betting company so that they could acquire them. And again, well-licensed. Now, if I look at some of our direct peers, I just want to draw some comparisons. So on the left, you've got Fans Unite. He's listed on the CSE in April. They're currently sitting on about 140, 150 million market cap. They're a B2B, a business-to-business esports book. So not a direct competitor, but a good indication of the space. Then you've got Esports Entertainment Group, or GMBL, on the NASDAQ. They listed in April. They're the only other publicly traded esports betting company globally. Their market cap is somewhere around 230 million right now. Then you've got Unicorn. These guys are still private. They were the first movers in the space. They raised 60 plus million privately. Market cap, from what I've heard, is in excess of 200 million. But these were techies. They didn't have gambling expertise. And as a result, they squandered their lead by making a few big mistakes early on. It was only a couple of years ago that they moved to a premium license, the same one that Luckbox has today. And really, I like to think of them as an example, is that we did in 2 years what they did in 5, and we did it with about 1/10 of the funding. In contrast, we're sitting at about a 52 million valuation right now, and I think that's pretty well priced in the space. A quick overview of the management team. So I touched into my history. Ran our CFO, 15 plus years of financial management experience, most recently at the Australian stock exchange company Parazero, and with 5 years of gambling experience at the giant 888, leading their financial planning unit. Thomas, our recent addition to our leadership team as an absolute industry heavyweight, is our chief customer officer. An incredible addition to the team. So he was the CEO of the challenger casino brand Dunder, which exited for approximately 90 million. Previous to that, he was the chief product officer for Mr. Green, again exited for about $250 million. And before that, he was the director of business intelligence for both Entain and Electronic Arts. So like myself, a huge fusion of both gaming and gambling experience, bringing a very data-driven, customer-driven approach to our product going forward. Lee, a decade of licensing and regulatory experience in the industry. He's helped more than 40 companies get different gambling licenses around the world. And rounding off the management team, we've got Metodi. He's a sportsbook legend and an absolute data head. He built all the in-play betting back when that was a brand new thing for what is now Entain, the second largest gambling company in the world. And he went on to do the same for UltraPlay, which was one of the world's first B2B esports books, where he built all of their risk and odds models from scratch and trained all the trading teams. So an absolute industry heavyweight around the team. Jumping to the board. So our chairman, Drew, he's the CEO of Indochino, which is a custom apparel brand, top 500 e-commerce brand in North America. He's also the co-founder and chairman of a couple of TSX-V listed companies, Emerge and Bruche. And in 2018, Ernst & Young nominated him, made him Entrepreneur of the Year. Brings a wealth of compliance and general corporate governance, and general business leadership expertise. Then we've got Maruf, head of our audit committee. He's national director of MMP for public companies. He sits on the board of 2 TSX companies. Again, brings a wealth of corporate governance and financial experience and being public. Lloyd, former manager and mentor of mine. He's Executive Vice President of Casino at VGW, which is a private multi-billion-dollar social casino company. He's previously held roles as Director and Senior Director at the Stars Group, Zynga, and Disney. So much like myself, and Thomas continues to bring a wealth of experience from the industry and really helps us with a black book of our contacts when it comes to talk about traction to date. We're still early in our revenue days. Hold on. There we go. Sorry, I'm just there. Okay. Let me just go back a slide. Perfect. We spent practically zero marketing dollars in 2020. I think we spent less than 100,000. Despite that, we've taken about 3 million in bets, operating at about 5% margin, meaning for every $100 bet, we make about $5 in revenue. But obviously, when you place a bet and win, you go on to bet again. So on average, we make about $40 of every $100 deposited. Despite growing purely organically, we've already scaled our social media channels to over 50,000 followers, and we plan to scale that substantially this year as content marketing becomes a key pillar for us to grow, particularly as it creates a barrier to entry because it can't be generated overnight by spending money. So provides an advantage over any late entrants into the space, particularly in a gambling behemoth that might want to try and get in there. And we're localized, given that we're operating in about 80 countries around the world. We're already localized in 5 languages: English, Russian, Chinese, Spanish, and Portuguese. Now, despite the early days of our product, just before Christmas, we became an award-winning platform. So the EGR Awards, which are the Oscars of the gambling industry, we won one of their 3 headline categories, which is for Rising Star, essentially making us the #1 company to watch in the gambling space. Now, I'm definitely up for the pressure that brings, and I'm chuffed that we won the award and can be proud of the team, but it also goes to highlight the importance that the gambling industry places on esports as we go into 2021 and beyond. We were also nominated for Best In-House Product and Esports Operator of the Year. Now, a recent milestone, so if you recall the model of the gambling industry where I talked about you acquire through one vertical and then cross-sell to all of the other ones, we went live with over 100 traditional sports a few weeks ago. So you can bet on basically any sport around the world, particularly looking forward to the Olympics later this year. And we'll be adding casino towards the tail end of this year to really bring us that full product of suite to leverage our expertise in the gambling space and generate additional revenue per user. Now, our growth strategy is pretty simple. We recently just closed a round for just under 18 million. And first and foremost is to grow and scale our existing business. So we're talking about fleshing out the leadership and marketing teams, investing at least 2-3 million into user acquisition throughout the rest of the year. We're looking at doing that via content marketing, so cultivating communities via Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and Discord, to both create and distribute esports betting content, both as a brand message, but also for acquisition. We're looking at affiliates and partnerships. So we just went live with Income Access, which is PaySafe's gambling affiliate platform with over 25,000 affiliates already integrated. We're talking influencer marketing, so working with Twitch and YouTube streamers. Generally, we've already got this live today, generally renowned as being the best medium for acquiring Gen X and Gen Z, our target customers. And finally, we're talking about direct digital media, so programmatic display, paid social, for reactivation and acquisition as well. And then secondly, we're beginning to put together our deal flow roadmap for the coming months. Now, we have multiple kind of areas on our M&A thesis, but we're very focused on acquiring an esports odds or data company, which is the only part of the esports betting value chain that we don't do in-house today. And we hope to be able to make an announcement of that later this year. So just a quick overview of our cap table. Now this is factoring in the round that we just did, which should become free trading in a few months, in a month or two. So we've got about 70 million shares out there. We're about 100 million fully diluted. Only about 20% of that is paper. About a third of it is held by insiders, all of whom are locked up from a minimum of 12 months all the way up to 33 months. We've got about 20 million cash in the bank. So we're not looking to raise right now. really just looking to execute on our roadmap, generate sustainable revenue for the rest of the year, and build the #1 esports betting destination. So with that in mind, hopefully 5 minutes, I'd love to hand it over for some questions. So let's just see if we've got any. What would you say? What would you say are the company's value catalysts moving forward? Thanks, Robert. Absolute classic. So we're taking us from an early revenue days company, really looking to scale that throughout the year. So what you'll see in the short term is taking a platform that was fantastic. We built everything that we needed to get us from inception today, including a world-leading front end. But we're going to be making changes on the back end to really make it robust and fully competitive to be the #1 in the space in the next couple of years. So you'll see multiple platform announcements of us signing additional third parties and starting to scale in marketing as we go through the year. Probably the clearest catalyst would be late, towards the end of the year when we look to add a casino as an additional revenue that we expect that to generate at least about maybe a 20 to 50% additional lifetime value for our customers. And M&A would probably be the next largest. I'd hope for us to close our first deal sometime over the summer. So those would be the key catalysts that I would like us to focus on for the year going forward. So fantastic. I think I've got a second question. I'm going to hit refresh. Regarding margin, I say 5%, but you lose some bets presumably. So we operate a fixed odds sportsbook, which is exactly the same as the vast majority of traditional sportsbooks out there today. So when a player places the bet, they're betting against us. So we do all of our risk management in-house. So far, we haven't come even remotely close to any of our risk thresholds. So just to explain this briefly, we do two things in parallel. Essentially, we've got humans sitting on top of a lot of very clever algorithms. So first and foremost, we do risk management based on the event. So to use a tennis example, for the Grand Slams, we'll accept a lot of bets because we know the players, there's lots of prize pool, there's lots of data available. But for the qualifiers, we'll take much smaller bets, have a much reduced risk threshold. And secondly, we do player profiling. So for example, if one of our customers has bet $100 with us every single week on his favorite team, they're more than welcome to come back. They're a very innocent player. Whereas if somebody comes in, tries to deposit $10,000 in their first deposit and wants to place a bet on, Tier 2, Dota 2 qualifier in Taiwan, we're going to reject that bet because it's just too suspicious. And we use both of these in parallel to risk manage. And Metodi, again, to come into our leadership team, is one of the most experienced people in the space there. So, so far we've managed to consistently hit a 5% margin over the last year and a half. So slightly wary of time, just going to hold it here in case a third question comes in. And there it is, right on the money. Distribution of betting clients globally. How will Bill 218C in Canada affect our business? So thanks very much, Adam. Our primary regions, LATAM, South America is our primary region. We're also looking at the CIS regions as well as Northern Europe. And like I said before, I think we accept customers in around 80 countries today. We look very keenly at Bill 218C, and we're part of the Canada Gambling Association. And from what we've seen so far, the regulation looks like it's going to be a pretty good license. And assuming there aren't no surprises there, then we hope to be licensed in Canada as soon as those licenses become available. And really look forward to bringing safer gambling towards the Canadian public. We're really looking. Assuming there are no curveballs with the quality of the license at the last minute, or licenses, should I say, because it'll be on a territorial basis. And one last question, which I'll try and sneak into the last minute. Which esports are most popular? So the same with us and any of the betting platforms. The big three make up about 90-95% of betting volume. Those would be CSGO, Dota 2, and League of Legends. We accept bets on, I think it's about 14 or 15 esports titles. We just added Valorant, which is the hottest title at the moment. And in general, we have more matches to bet on and more markets within them to bet on than any other competitor in the space. So I think that's a great question to end on. I'd like to thanks very much for listening and all the questions. Feel free to contact us at investments@luckbox.com with any follow-ups. Thanks very much.
Thank you. This does conclude today's webcast. Thank you for your participation and have a wonderful day.